What would you do if the person who broke your heart 10 years ago suddenly held your life in their hands? What if the love you thought was dead turned out to be the one thing keeping you alive? Stay until the end, because what happens in that hospital room will change everything you believe about second chances. And trust me, the twist at the very end? You'll never see it coming. Before we dive in, if stories about love, redemption, and fate speak to your heart, hit that like button right now. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story that might just change your perspective on life. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The story begins. Marcus Chen had everything money could buy. At 42 years old, he had built an empire from nothing, transforming a small tech startup in his garage into a billion-dollar company that employed thousands of people across 3 continents. His face graced the covers of business magazines. His name was whispered in boardrooms with a mixture of respect and envy. His penthouse overlooked the glittering skyline of Manhattan, and his garage housed cars that most people only dreamed about. But on this particular Tuesday morning, as Marcus sat in his corner office watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of gold and amber, he felt something he hadn't acknowledged in years. Emptiness. The kind that no amount of money could fill. The kind that crept in during quiet moments and reminded him that success, without someone to share it with, was just loneliness wearing a designer suit. His assistant, Rebecca, knocked twice before entering. She had been with him for 15 years, and she was perhaps the only person who truly understood the man behind the billionaire mask. "Mr. Chen, your annual physical is scheduled for this afternoon." Dr. Patterson's office called to confirm. Marcus nodded without looking up. He had been avoiding this appointment for months. Not because he was afraid of doctors, but because lately, his body had been sending him warnings he couldn't ignore. The persistent fatigue. The occasional chest tightness. The way he sometimes lost his breath climbing a single flight of stairs. At 42, he was supposed to be in his prime. Instead, he felt like a machine running on borrowed time. "I'll be there," he said quietly. What Marcus didn't know was that Dr. Patterson had retired unexpectedly the previous week due to a family emergency. What he didn't know was that the universe had been waiting 10 years to bring 2 paths back together. What he didn't know was that his life was about to change in ways no amount of money could have prepared him for. The medical center was one of the most prestigious in the city, the kind of place where discretion was guaranteed and privacy was worth its weight in gold. Marcus arrived in his black Bentley, accompanied only by his driver. He had dismissed his usual security detail, wanting to feel normal for just one afternoon. The waiting room was elegant but sterile, filled with other wealthy patients who pretended not to recognize each other. Marcus checked in at the front desk, gave his insurance information that he didn't actually need, and settled into a leather chair to wait. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Marcus was growing impatient, checking his phone, answering emails, trying to distract himself from the growing anxiety in his chest. Finally, a nurse appeared at the door. "Mr. Chen? The doctor will see you now." He followed her down a long corridor, past examination rooms with closed doors and the distant sound of medical equipment beeping. The nurse stopped outside room 7, smiled politely, and gestured for him to enter. "The doctor will be with you shortly. Please change into the gown provided." Marcus did as instructed, feeling vulnerable in a way that billions of dollars couldn't protect him from. He sat on the examination table, the paper crinkling beneath him, and stared at the diplomas on the wall. Harvard Medical School. Johns Hopkins Residency. Fellowship at Mayo Clinic. Whoever this doctor was, they were clearly accomplished. Then the door opened. And Marcus Chen's world stopped spinning. Standing in the doorway, wearing a white coat with a stethoscope around her neck, was Sofia Rivera. The woman he had loved with every fiber of his being. The woman he had let go. The woman who had haunted his dreams for 10 long years. She looked up from the chart in her hands, and their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them could speak. Sophia had imagined this moment 1,000 times. In her fantasies, she had always been composed, professional, unmoved by the sight of the man who had shattered her heart. In reality, she felt like the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. Marcus, she breathed, his name escaping before she could stop it. He looked older now, distinguished in a way that only made him more handsome. Silver streaked his temples, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. But those eyes, dark and deep and impossibly intense, were exactly the same. They were the eyes she had fallen in love with in that tiny coffee shop near campus, the eyes that had looked at her like she was the only person in the world, the eyes that had been filled with pain the last time she saw them. Sophia. His voice was barely a whisper. I didn't know. I thought. Dr. Patterson retired, she managed to say, forcing herself into professional mode. I'm covering his patients temporarily. The silence that followed was deafening. She should transfer him to another doctor. That would be the ethical thing to do. The safe thing. But something kept her frozen in place, something that had nothing to do with medical protocol and everything to do with unfinished business that had waited a decade to be resolved. Should I request someone else? Marcus asked, reading her hesitation. Sophia took a deep breath. She was a professional. She had spent 15 years building a career, saving lives, proving that she was more than the heartbroken girl Marcus had left behind. She could handle this. That won't be necessary, she said, her voice steadier now. I'm your doctor today. Let's proceed with the examination. The next hour was the most surreal experience of Marcus's life. Sophia checked his blood pressure, listened to his heart, asked questions about his lifestyle and symptoms with clinical detachment. But beneath the professionalism, he could see her hands trembling slightly. He noticed the way she avoided direct eye contact. He caught the subtle catch in her breath when her fingers accidentally brushed against his skin. A decade of memories flooded back. The way they had met in that coffee shop, both reaching for the same cup by mistake. Their first date at a tiny Italian restaurant where they had talked until the owners politely kicked them out at closing time. The night he had told her about his dreams of building something that would change the world, and she had looked at him with absolute faith and said, "You will. I know you will." The night everything fell apart. Marcus. Sophia's voice pulled him back to the present. Her expression had changed, the professional mask slipping to reveal something that looked like concern. Real concern. Your blood pressure is extremely elevated. Your heart rhythm is irregular. When did you last have a comprehensive cardiac workup? He shrugged, trying to appear unconcerned. A few years ago, maybe. I've been busy. Too busy to take care of your health. There was an edge to her voice now, something that sounded almost like anger. You're showing multiple warning signs of serious cardiovascular stress. I'm ordering a full cardiac panel immediately. And I want you to have an echocardiogram before you leave this building. Is it that serious? Sophia looked at him for a long moment, and he saw the walls she had built start to crack. I don't know yet. But I'm not willing to take any chances. 2 hours later, Marcus sat in Sophia's office, waiting for the results. The room was filled with personal touches that told the story of her life since he had left. Photographs of her receiving awards. A picture of her with a group of children at what looked like a free clinic. A small plant on her desk, thriving and green. Evidence of a life well lived, a life that had continued and flourished without him. She entered carrying a folder, her expression grave. The results are in, she said, sitting down across from him. Marcus, you have significant blockage in 2 of your coronary arteries. Your heart has been working overtime for years, probably due to stress, poor diet, lack of exercise, and... She hesitated. And likely emotional factors as well. He absorbed the information in silence. Part of him wasn't even surprised. He had been running himself into the ground for a decade, using work as a way to avoid dealing with everything he had lost. What are my options? You need surgery. Angioplasty with stent placement, at minimum. And you need to make serious lifestyle changes. Otherwise. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. How long do I have? Before the surgery, I mean. We should schedule it within the next 2 weeks. Any longer, and you're risking a major cardiac event. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. You could have died, Marcus. If you had ignored this much longer, if you had kept pushing yourself the way you have been. I might have been reading about you in an obituary instead of treating you in an exam room. The weight of her words settled over him like a heavy blanket. But it wasn't the medical reality that affected him most. It was the way her voice cracked at the end. It was the way her eyes glistened with unshed tears. After everything, after 10 years of silence, she still cared whether he lived or died. Why did you leave me, Sophia? The question came out before he could stop it, hanging in the air between them like a ghost that had waited too long to be acknowledged. Sophia stood abruptly, turning to face the window so he wouldn't see her tears. You left me, Marcus. Not the other way around. That's not true. I came back for you. I came back, and you were gone. Your apartment was empty. Your phone was disconnected. It was like you had vanished from the face of the earth. She spun around, her eyes blazing. It was supposed to. It was an arrangement with a family in Shanghai. A business merger disguised as a marriage. I had no intention of going through with it, but my mother insisted on having the paperwork ready. Maya felt sick. So you're telling me that I accidentally married you because someone put the wrong papers in my stack? That's exactly what I'm telling you. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. Then we fix it. An annulment. A lawyer. Whatever it takes. This was clearly a mistake. Maya. Don't. She was shaking now, anger and humiliation burning through her. I trusted you. I trusted this job. I signed those documents in good faith, and now you're telling me that I'm legally bound to someone I barely know because of a clerical error? It's more complicated than that. How could it possibly be more complicated? Alexander crossed the room, stopping just feet from her. This close, she could see the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his jaw. Because the moment I found out what happened, I stopped the annulment proceedings. Maya stared at him. You what? I told the lawyers to hold off. I told them I needed time to consider options. He took a breath. I told them that maybe this wasn't a mistake after all. The world tilted. Maya reached for the desk to steady herself. You can't be serious. I know how this sounds. His voice softened in a way she had never heard before. I know I have no right to ask anything of you. But these past 3 months, Maya, you've become essential to me in ways I never anticipated. When I discovered what happened, my first thought wasn't about the legal complications or the company's reputation. My first thought was that maybe fate had given me an opportunity one was too cowardly to create myself. Fate? Maya laughed bitterly. You think fate wanted us to get married through fraud? It wasn't fraud. It was an accident. But what I feel for you, that's not accidental. He stepped closer, his gray eyes searching hers. Tell me you haven't felt it too. Tell me these months have meant nothing to you, and I'll sign the annulment papers today. Maya wanted to deny it. She wanted to tell him he was arrogant and presumptuous and completely out of his mind. But she couldn't, because somewhere along the way, she had fallen for this impossible man. She had fallen for his dedication, his hidden kindness, the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the room who mattered. But this wasn't a fairy tale. This was her life, and she wasn't about to let anyone, not even Alexander Blackwood, make decisions for her. You had no right to stop those proceedings, she said quietly. Whatever you feel, whatever I might feel, that doesn't give you the right to trap me in a marriage I didn't consent to. Pain flashed across his face. You're right. I know you're right. Then fix it. Give me the annulment. He nodded slowly. If that's what you want. It's what I want. Maya walked out of his office without looking back. She made it to the elevator before the tears came. She made it to her apartment before she collapsed against the door, sobbing into her hands, wondering how her life had spun so completely out of control. She didn't go to work the next day. Or the day after. Daniel called, then texted, then finally stopped trying. A week passed. Maya spent it in a fog, applying for other jobs, visiting her grandmother, trying to convince herself that she had made the right choice. But at night, she dreamed of gray eyes and missed chances. She dreamed of a man who had seen past her professional exterior to something vulnerable underneath, who had made her feel valued in ways she hadn't experienced since her grandmother's mind began to fade. She dreamed, and she woke up crying, and she hated herself for wanting something she couldn't have. On the 10th day, her grandmother had a moment of clarity. These were becoming rare, precious windows where the fog of dementia lifted and she became herself again. Maya was holding her hand, telling her about the job she had lost, when her grandmother squeezed her fingers with surprising strength. The billionaire, she said, her eyes suddenly sharp. You love him. Maya wanted to deny it. It's complicated, Nana. Love is always complicated. Her grandmother smiled, looking exactly as she had when Maya was a little girl seeking comfort after a nightmare. But running from it doesn't make it less complicated. It just makes you a coward. He tricked me. He kept me in a marriage without my consent. Did he force you to feel what you feel? Did he create the connection you clearly share? Her grandmother shook her head slowly. He made a mistake. A foolish, desperate mistake of a man who didn't know how to ask for what he wanted. That doesn't make him a villain, child. That makes him human. Maya thought about this for days. She thought about her parents, who had died before they could grow old together, whose love story ended on an icy highway when she was too young to understand loss. She thought about all the chances we don't take because we're afraid of being hurt, all the walls we build to protect hearts that end up suffocating behind them. 2 weeks after she walked out of Alexander's office, she walked back in. He was sitting at his desk, but he looked different. Tired. Diminished somehow, as though something vital had been drained from him. When he saw her standing in the doorway, he went completely still. The annulment papers, she said. You never sent them. No. His voice was rough. I couldn't. I know I should have. I know I promised. But every time I tried to sign them, he broke off, running a hand over his face. I'm sorry. I'll do it today. Right now, if you want. Maya stepped into the office, closing the door behind her. Do you remember what you said that day? You said this wasn't a mistake. You said fate gave you an opportunity you were too cowardly to create yourself. Alexander said nothing, watching her with wary hope. I've been thinking about that. About fate and opportunities and the choices we make when we're scared. She stopped in front of his desk, her heart pounding. I didn't consent to that marriage license. That's true. But I didn't consent to falling in love with you either, and that happened anyway. She saw his breath catch. Maya. Let me finish. She held up her hand. You had no right to make that choice for me. But maybe I have a right to make a different choice now. Maybe I get to decide that what started as an accident could become something intentional. Something real. Alexander rose slowly from his chair, moving around the desk until he stood before her. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying that I want to try. I'm saying that maybe, instead of annulling a marriage neither of us meant to create, we could actually see if there's something worth building here. She took a shaky breath. But it has to be my choice. It has to be equal. I'm not your employee in this. I'm not someone you can manage or acquire. If we do this, we do it as partners. Partners, he repeated softly. I think I can work with that. He reached out, cupping her face in his hands with a gentleness that made her eyes sting. I've been empty since you left. I thought I knew what loneliness was. I've spent most of my life alone. But these 2 weeks without you taught me that there's a difference between being alone and missing someone so much that every moment feels like drowning. Alexander. I don't just want a marriage license with you, Maya. I want morning coffee and terrible movies on Sunday nights. I want to hold your hand in public and argue about whose turn it is to choose the restaurant. I want to be there when you visit your grandmother. I want to be your family, if you'll let me. Maya felt tears sliding down her cheeks. My grandmother said I was running from love because I was afraid. And now? Now I'm done running. He kissed her then, soft and searching, and Maya felt something unlock in her chest, something she had been guarding since she was 7 years old and learned that love could be taken away without warning. But standing here, in this man's arms, she understood that protecting herself from loss meant protecting herself from life. And she was ready, finally, to live. The next 6 months were both the hardest and the most beautiful of Maya's life. True to her word, she refused to be simply an accessory to Alexander's world. She continued working as a translator, but at a rival company, something that amused the business press and scandalized their society pages in equal measure. They dated like regular people, navigating schedules and misunderstandings and the slow work of truly learning another person. Alexander met her grandmother on a rainy afternoon in October. Maya warned him that Nana might not remember the visit, might not even recognize that he was there. But somehow, that day, her grandmother was present and sharp-eyed. She held Alexander's hand, studied his face, and pronounced him acceptable, the highest compliment she ever gave. They had a real wedding 6 months later. Small, private, just close friends and Maya's grandmother, who cried throughout the ceremony and then forgot it happened by evening. But Maya had the photographs, and sometimes she would show them to her grandmother, watching the fleeting recognition in those familiar eyes, treasuring every moment of connection that remained. The marriage wasn't perfect. Alexander still worked too much. Maya still struggled with vulnerability, with allowing herself to depend on someone else. They argued about money and time and the future, about whether to have children and where to spend holidays. But they never stopped choosing each other, never stopped doing the hard work of building a partnership.